best brains from the Bay and beyond. What a special evening we have in store for today. Two living legends, icons of hip hop, and we're going to talk about philanthropy and legacy. We're going to talk about turning influence in the music industry into an empire. And also, what were the original creative inspirations that changed this that changed the space as well? So, without any further ado, we can kick this off with a couple quick introductions, but really not necessary. We've got OG Arabian Prince, founding member of N.W.A, Tareef Michael, founding member of Wu-Tang Management Group. I'm just so excited, and we're also going to leave probably some time towards the end for the audience to ask some questions as well. So maybe if you fellas want to do a quick introduction, 30 seconds, and we'll light this candle.
I was born a poor black child in Compton.
Steve Martin.
There you go. You like that, right? Just happy to be here. We're going to kick some knowledge, as we always do. And me and my boy T over here about to show you what we got, right?
I actually grew up with the Wu-Tang members prior to them becoming Wu-Tang. And it's just been an organic journey of brotherhood and lessons and a lot of wisdom. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Well, so I mean, just to kind of get things rolling, I'm curious if you guys could time travel and go back and give yourselves a piece of advice before all the fame, what would you want to share with your younger self?
Get an attorney first. That would be the first. But honestly, the first thing for me is, hey, dude, get an attorney. Don't sign. Well, don't sign nothing. Don't let nobody go get your money for you. Like, honestly, that would be it. Get an attorney first.
So it's good wisdom for all the kids listening.
Yeah, get an attorney.
Well, I'll jump in there. Even with attorneys, my opinion is learn it yourself. Learn the business yourself because, a lot of the attorneys are snakes too. So,
Amen.
And so, yeah.
Maybe an attorney you can trust, right? So I imagine being able to take this space of music and culture and turning it into a business. I mean, you've turned that into an art in and of itself, like, over decades, Tareef. So maybe if you could share with us what were some inspirations for maintaining cultural relevance and reinvention while keeping creativity in a nucleus. I mean, how are you thinking about the business of music?
Well, real quick, I'll take you back, right? Believe it or not, it was myself and a couple members of, the Wu-Tang family, right? Whether members or management now, right? We actually were out here in California, right? And heard N.W.A. Like when they were selling everything out of the trunk and everything. And we actually got inspiration from that. And we said, look, we went back home saying, yo, these cats are out here selling stuff out the trunk and, what they were doing. And we just went back and said, we can do it too. You know what I mean? Obviously, RZA was the brains behind the operation. And, we followed his lead and his insight. But we basically, he laid the plan and it was up to us to activate it, I guess you say. Yeah.
In preparation for the talk this evening, I was doing some other research, including the genesis of Rolex. And what's interesting about Rolex is back when they first started, because watches have like hundreds of pieces in them, they selected the best of all those different parts and then brought them together into a nucleus, and then they created something super strong. It almost feels like you guys did the same, but that hadn't been done before. That was brand new. So what was the philosophy of managing all this incredible talent, but also bringing it together for something that's like, collectively just truly remarkable?
Well, I'd say that, in the beginning, it was more based off of brotherhood, I would say, right? A lot of us, obviously RZA had his experience, him and GZA had their experience in the industry first, right? And basically RZA came back with that knowledge and shared it with all of us, right? I wasn't a rapper, so I had to get in where I fit in, right? And early on, actually, it wasn't like we were wearing hats and had roles. We just were support, right? Anyway, I might be security one day. I might be whatever, right? You know, you had guys that never DJ, but they were the DJ for a day, you know? And that's just how it worked. And then, you know, obviously over time we began to take on roles and things like that. But you know, to be honest, and looking back, because we were so young, you know what I mean? You know, we you know, as youngsters, we were pretty smart, you know what I mean, as far as, you know, with our entrepreneurial spirit, you know. And you know, obviously, you know, with Wu-Tang, the music side of things, but then there was Wu-Wear, there was all these things that we were developing, and we basically were just said, hey, if we can think it, man, let's live it out. How can we live it out?
Is there a particular entrepreneurial mindset? Because like that feels like a good foundation, right? Like learning from your peers. There's that grind, that just hustle mentality. But what else was it about that early hip hop culture that do you think translates even in today's for modern entrepreneurism? Would you say?
I would say, he said, and you said both, the hustle, right? And early on, a lot of people don't talk about the early days of hip hop. Cats was just trying to eat, right? He was trying to eat. He was trying to like get things, like you're young and you want things. You want food, you want a car, you want nice clothes, you want sneakers. And, coming up in the hood, you couldn't afford that stuff. But finding that key, like, you mean if I like, we all started on the West Coast, we all started as DJs. So, me, Dre, Yella, we all started as DJs. So we started seeing that I can rock a crowd in 1983, 82, 83, 84, and make $200. That's a lot of money in the early 80s for a 16-year-old, right? So it was like, okay, I'm doing this. And then when the rap scene kind of started to bubble up, we would bring East Coast artists to LA to perform. Matter of fact, I'm wearing a Skateland USA Compton, jacket right now. We would bring these artists to Skateland. I mean, we brought LL Cool J to Skateland. We brought Queen Latifah to Skateland. We brought a lot of artists, Run DMC to Skateland. And we would see them perform, and we're like, we could do that. Like, they're making records, and we're DJing their records. We can make records. So, like he said, we figured it out, went in the studio, made a record, and we would literally sell them out of trunks of our car or hop on a bus with a 50-pack of vinyl or, cassettes. Before times, they didn't have CDs back then. But we would just do that. And that was the hustle to, early entrepreneurism.
Do you think everyone got the message that you guys were sharing, or did it maybe get caught up in controversy? And what are your thoughts around that?
We knew what we were doing. Like I said, they saw us and like, wait, they out there selling records on their own. We can do that. So I think it helped to grow the hip hop community and what we were doing. And, back to getting an attorney, I think what messes up everything, and you guys were lucky enough to have management in-house. Our managers messed it up for us. We brought in corporate people or people that knew that we knew nothing about business at the time. We're young kids, we didn't know about writers and publishing and royalties and all of these things early on. And we got taken advantage of, for millions of dollars early on. So until we figured it out.
Yeah, it almost feels like maybe some of that predatory behavior still exists.
Oh, it ain't never changed.
Yeah.
It ain't changed.
So maybe I look at misfortune and I see opportunity. I mean, is there a way to fix this? Is there a way to shift how content, specifically music, which is beautiful because it brings us all together, but is there a way to make sure that the artists are not getting screwed?
Kill Spotify. Yeah, I said it. Come get me. No, seriously, like,
We're on Spotify.
Honestly, you got me started now. I honestly don't know who made that deal. I didn't sign anything. Did y'all sign something? I didn't sign to say that you can stream my songs and give me 0.2 cents per stream. Where on the radio, I'm getting, was it 5 cents, 8 cents a play? Something like that. So it went from 5 to 8 cents per play to micro pennies per stream. And I don't know who did that deal. And that's what's really killed the art form of music, because if there were starving artists before, they really starving now. So that's got to be fixed somehow, whether it's through Congress, whether it's through new companies coming up. There's a lot of companies coming up on the blockchain that are trying to fix that, but it's got to change.
I mean, there's actually a lot of legal matter, especially the older your catalog, right? There's a lot of legal issues that are going on. If we notice with De La Soul, they just got their music back recently, right? But under these old contracts, they obviously were putting the music, a lot of the labels were putting the music into, places like Spotify and so forth under these deals, right? And then a lot of people, because under the contract, streaming wasn't known yet, right? So, like I said, that goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's just understanding and being knowledgeable of the business and also not being desperate, right? A lot of people, at the end of the day, they have lawyers or they're looking at the contracts, but they're so desperate they sign it anyway, you know? And that's a big factor, the desperation of artists and talent.
If we translate that back to modern founders, because there's a lot of founders in this community, how can they stay strong and then maybe, I don't know, shop a deal? Or is it a mindset? Or how are you thinking about this as far as maximizing value and not getting taken advantage of?
I'd say that, first of all, you have to understand what your value is, right? If you have value and how to build that value, right? And the beauty of today, right, as opposed to us, in the times we were coming up, there's so many outlets now, right? You can literally, get on your phone or whatever and be in touch with the world, right? And going back to what he was saying, we would have to travel over here to know what's going on, or get on the phone, right? To even and you really don't know, you're on the phone, he might be telling me something over here, right? But unless you're over here experiencing and seeing it. So like you said, when artists were coming over here and performing at events with them and so forth, we were just intrigued to come over here and learn what's going on over here as they were coming over to the East Coast, you know?
Speaking of the East Coast and West Coast, who deserves to be on the Mount Rushmore of rap?
Ooh, oh my God. See, you trying to start trouble now, because everybody asks that. It's almost kind of like asking this, like the LeBron, Kobe, Michael Jordan. Like, I stay out of that stuff because, I love hip hop. I love music, and just like I'm gonna go back to the NBA. Just like the NBA, there are different eras of the NBA. And Michael Jordan is known as the greatest, but a lot of people say, well, if Michael was playing now, or if LeBron was playing then, or if it's so I really never get into that. And but I mean, Rakim got to be on there somewhere, right? You would think. I'm just gonna put that out. On the East Coast, it got to be like Rakim. On the West Coast, I got to be like biased, and I'll say Ice Cube, because Ice Cube has held it down for the West, and he's still holding it down, in that generation. There's a lot of newer generations, the Kendricks and a lot of people like that, but I can't give you a Mount Rushmore. I can't do it.
I mean, I'm gonna jump out there, and be biased as well. I feel there's no greater group than Wu-Tang. And no disrespect to nobody and what they've done, but if you really look at it, you look at the catalog, you look at what, the members have done, and just, the organization has done, you know, the numbers say it for itself, you know what I mean? And just the catalog and the material that they put out. And being here 30 years later and still, we toured 22, 23 with Nas, and we were one of the highest selling tours, A lot of tours were canceling shows, So I just look at the longevity, I look at the catalog and everything. And you know, yeah, Wu-Tang.
Along those lines, in preparation for the show, I found a pretty fascinating quote from yours a few years ago. I'm going to read it to you, and then I want your impression.
Just to add in though, but we love N.W.A, you know. No, for real. Like I said, we were out here and heard them, man, and we were like, yeah, we were inspired for real.
Oh, and before you go into that quote, you said jump in, and I got a quick
Please.
funny story about New York. So we go to New York for the first time ever. We had never been to New York, right? So we're going to New York, and they got us performing at not the Roxy, but what's the other club? There's another club down there that all the rappers. No, not Latin Quarters. It was in Brooklyn, the Bronx, something. I can't remember. I'm too old. But anyway, we get there, right? And we go up on stage about to perform, and they got these two like huge 7-foot bodyguards on the side of the stage. It was like, we cool. We don't need y'all. Why y'all here? In case they don't like you. Because we from the West Coast and we coming to the East Coast about to rock it, and we got love. So I'm grateful of that. So.
It brings people together. That's beautiful. Tareef, back to your quote. There's a reflective spirit happening right now in the music industry. With everyone sitting still, it gives people the opportunity to be more creative and work on projects they weren't able to before, or maybe were sitting on the shelf. It's also a blessing for many to be able to spend time with their family and focus on their health. What was that chapter like for you guys when the world stopped?
I mean, just like, what I said there, obviously in the quote, but, it was a time to be still for a minute, and, we were still at first, and then, we got into, on calls. So we do these Wu Wednesday calls, right? So, we began to, see, I think it caused people to figure out how, other ways to operate, right? Obviously, we can't be out and about. We can't tour. What other ways, can we function, But of course, it allowed us as well, it was a lot of things, conversations about health, of being better fathers, and husbands or whatever, it was a lot of reflection,
Just out of curiosity, like what's the weirdest place you guys have ever heard your own music? Was it like a bathroom in Saigon or the elevator, or what's
A church? Yeah. We matter of fact, it was in Seattle. You say you're back and forth to Seattle. I did years later, I did a festival in Seattle, and for some weird reason, they had one of the parties in a church, and they were just bumping N.W.A in this church, and I'm like, I'm going to hell.
So it's kind of a cheesy one, but you guys are on a desert island and you get 3 albums. What 3 albums are you picking?
Prince, For You, old school Prince. Parliament Funkadelic, the probably I gotta go live, the Parliament Funkadelic live, the one with the landing on the mothership, right? And then Kraftwerk. Numbers, those 3.
I'd probably say Wu-Tang Forever.
What's Fun Time in Shaolin?
I could go. No, we're not gonna take that one.
There's only one.
I could do Funkadelic too. That joint right there, and then I might jump out there with KRS. Boogie Down Productions. Yeah, that was a meaningful moment when they came on the scene.
Tell us more. What was it when you first heard it?
No, just obviously the battle back and forth between KRS and MC Shan and that whole thing. It was like, it was a vibe, I guess you say, in New York at that time. Yeah.
Speaking of albums, when you guys had released Once Upon a Time Shaolin, there was one that was kind of made history in and of itself. If you were to pick another physical item in hip hop culture, and for that to be auctioned to represent hip hop, what would that item be?
That's a hard one.
We'll come back to that one. So we're gonna leave some time for the audience. So start thinking about what questions we want to ask here.
And don't be asking what kind of toilet paper I use.
We think about like wisdom. In fact, David had mentioned that knowledge is everywhere. Like we can always pull from chat GPT, but wisdom maybe feels like it's in short supply. Aside from getting a good attorney, what are some other pieces of wisdom that you've been able to gather over the years that maybe had a big impact on you that you want to share with the next generation?
You know what? Let's talk about that, the chat GPT and AI real quick as far as wisdom and all that. Because I was talking, who was I talking to earlier about AI? Somebody, yeah, we had a long conversation about it. You know, I am partners in a few AI ventures, you know, as well. And one thing that we all understand is AI is not balanced, right? There's not enough cultural information being fed into AI. That's another story. I got some cooking for that. But, you know, you were talking about, you know, your kids and how they go everywhere else to get information. Then from the source, this man who knows what's going on, lived it, been there, but they want to ask everybody else who doesn't know. And I think a lot of the problem with ChatGPT and AI is there's not enough there's not enough wisdom being fed into AI or being fed just into the internet itself for this next generation to feed off of. So, you know, instead of coming to the source, to this man, me, Wu-Tang, N.W.A, or the people who lived experience or go, you know, whether it's the inner cities or the rural communities or, you know, the Native American communities or cultural, you know, centers, we're not getting that information. So that to me is, I think, something that needs to change for this world to be a little more balanced, in my opinion. I know I went off on a little tangent,
No.
but
I'm glad you mentioned that because frankly, you've always kind of been ahead of your time from a technology perspective. And so if N.W.A were to drop a new album today, do you think it would be good to use AI to remix or release or use it in some capacity? Maybe deep fakes if you could do a collaboration with somebody?
I'm not really into the deep fake stuff, but I really believe that, you know, we have to use the tools of the future to be relevant in the future. You know, I go back and I'm a music, you know, I'm just really deep into all forms of music. So if you go back and look at 100 years of music, every generation has a tool that was invented that generation was like, it's gonna kill music. Like, you know, when the electric guitar came out, it's gonna kill music. When the synthesizers came, I'm just gonna, you know, sampling. Every generation has something, and now it's AI. And what we have to understand, and no disrespect to artists or, you know, creators and musicians or social media influencers that use AI, you know, mostly for what they do, you still have to be an artist and know what's good. You have to know what's a hit no matter what tool you use. So unless you're feeding AI something, you're not going to get anything out but a copy of something else. You still have to feed it the right things to be creative, to make an original piece. Like, this man knows what a hit record is. And I always tell people, just like with technology or a startup, because I have startups as well, I always tell people, never fall in love with what you're doing. Just keep grinding at it and you'll feel when it's right. Some people are always trying to sell a product or sell their company and it ain't ready. And the real creators, the real hit makers, whether it's in music or tech or anything, know when they have a hit. And I think that's, you know, the same with AI.
No, that's beautifully put. Tareef, even back in the day, like when were your spidey senses tingling when you're like, this is a winner?
I don't know if it was, you know, something I necessarily heard. I mean, we actually I think we played Lollapalooza or something. We were in West Virginia or somewhere, right? And just looking out, seeing like 80,000 people go crazy to the music, you know, was like, okay, yeah, you know, because, you know, sometimes when you're close to something, you don't see it the same way as everyone else sees it, right? It's like I'm with them every day. You know, I've been with them every day. I've known their talents even before Wu-Tang formed. We always knew the guys that had talent. So, you know, but I think that was the moment for me, to be honest, seeing that on that level. We did a lot of performances, but I think that was one of our biggest shows early on.
That must have been surreal.
It was crazy.
In fact, it's pretty interesting because like if you look at like imagine the Wu-Tang logo, that that makes you feel something. Like people feel that. It's not just a brand, there's emotion, there's connection there. Where do you think that comes from? And what does it mean to people?
I think, listen, everybody, like he was talking about hits and stuff like that, everybody, there's always something that comes along that's just has that power, with the people. And I think it was just the originality and the rawness of the guys, just being who they were. And then, and like I said, when I was being biased about Wu-Tang, I mean, think about it. You're talking about 9 MCs, right? And all of them, you know what I mean? That's why I say it'll never happen again, right? I challenge people all the time. I want to see another 9 member group ever happen again on the level that they have done it, right? So, I think a lot of it of how we we're able to tie in with the fan base or what have you, or with just the world, I guess you say, right? Whether it was through the logo or whatever the case, even today, right? We could be somewhere and the beauty of it now is, we've been able to move through generations, right? So if you whether you go to a show or we could be in an elevator, right, with the members in the elevator, and it's a young kid in there wearing a Wu-Tang shirt, but he doesn't even know he's in there with Wu-Tang. But I'm saying it just how that has transitioned, through generations.
I gotta say something about that. So I'm at a casino, maybe 3, 4 weeks ago. There was she got to be like 80-year-old lady in one of them carts, with the she had a Wu Tang, and I walked up to her and I'm like, dude, yeah. She's like Wu Tang. I was like, all right, yeah. So it's like I said, transcend.
So take us back, because obviously there's been a bunch of crazy moments in early hip hop. When you're looking back, if you ever think to yourself like, God, I can't believe we pulled that off, or like a specific moment.
There's a lot of moments.
Well, I told that joke in there, and it's not actually not a joke. I just keep saying I can't believe we didn't go to jail. That's literally like some of the stuff that we pulled off was like, I can't believe we didn't go to jail. Yeah, that's because there was a lot of those moments.
I mean, there's one moment, right, that's been published many times, but I guess this was a moment, right? I guess ODB was on the run at the time, right? Everybody knows this story, right? And he showed up for a performance in New York in a disguise and everything, and then performed, and then, the police are chasing him out of the building, trying to catch him, and so forth. I think that was a surreal moment too.
What a legend.
But
Yeah.
imagine just dressing up like, I forget. I think he was dressed like a woman or something. It was crazy.
And now his son's in the mix too.
Yeah, yeah. And that's surreal. Seeing him on stage perform his father's parts is and that's the beauty too, right? Of the brand.
So we always want to make sure to be valuable to our guests in the zombie community here. So maybe if we could share something of that you're building now that we could be valuable, that we could be valuable to you, because we're streaming. We're in over 80 countries, and also we'll tag in some of the audience too. But maybe is there a venture that you guys are building right now that we could share with the zombie community so we can help you guys?
I don't know. I mean, we're all building, working on a lot of stuff. We both do a lot of stuff for giving back to the inner cities. I build technology centers across the country. Actually, for all you Silicon people, we just partnered with my company. It's called Innovate Next and Innovate Capital. We just partnered with Plug and Play up in Silicon to build their first, or help them. I think I can talk about it now, to help them build their first ever technology center. So we're actually going to be building a high-level tech center inside of Plug and Play for startups to come in and be able to use the tools to, build.
Because I know that capital is like super crucial, right? So
Yes.
you're raising a
We're raising
$50 million fund, maybe.
$150 million fund right now, which we couldn't talk about a couple weeks ago because I heard that we was all scared. Like, we're raising a fund. They were like, you can't talk about raising a fund. They're going to arrest you. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm in interviews every day and I can't talk about it. But I heard the SEC just changed that. So we're raising a fund, $150 million. And yeah, but anyway.
Tell us about it. Like, what's the capital going towards?
It's kind of gone through this ebb and flow kind of thing. Cause we were like, when I was 16, I'll talk about this. I've been in tech for 42 years. When I made my first record, I got some money. I wanted to buy a car. My mother took my money and made me get an accountant. But it worked. She made me, I invested in a lot of early tech, like big tech in the early 80s, and then got a computer and started learning how to code. I'm going through this really, really quick. And got into computers, learned how to do animation and sprite animation and coding, and used to go to these conventions and went to a SIGGRAPH convention playing with some computers, and somebody from a company called Saban said, hey, you're pretty good messing around with the animation software. You want to work on a project? I'm like, I'm a rapper. I don't work. Like, I want a job. And he was like, well, it's a cartoon called Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And I ended up doing all the visual effects on Power Rangers, Silver Surfer, Addams Family, Casper, a lot of film and TV, and then a bunch of video games over the last 40-something years. So my point is that kind of sparked me into investing because I was getting real money because, early on we weren't making money on records because we was getting ripped off. And I started making money on the film and TV side and the animation side and the video game side and investing that money in the 80s and the 90s and realized like, dude, I'm making more money doing this. And then, later on I invested in Twitch. I invested in StockX, a lot of cultural things. So my fund it started out as going to be a DEI diversity fund, but it's really a cultural fund, like following cultural growth in tech and young money. Like I've often said that if you want to make money in tech, follow the young eyes. TikTok, all the young people on TikTok, billions and billions of dollars. What are they doing next? Following that, looking at technology and growth in those areas that the younger generation, the cultural generations are in, and putting money and putting resources and tech into that, and that's kind of what our fund is about.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And if you're an LP, bet on the waiting horse right here. Well, yeah, let's toss this to the audience. And
Hey everyone. So I just wanted to also talk about something that you mentioned, Nick, about like the Wu-Tang logo being so powerful. Like it's so powerful, I got it tatted on me, Yeah. And I'm also curious about like some more iconic moments between Wu-Tang and N.W.A. We all know about Old Dirty running on the Oscars and like, doing his thing. And then also the great beef between Ice Cube and N.W.A. Just curious about like those iconic moments and, see if you can provide us with some behind the scenes insights.
Well, I think you're referring to that song called No Vaseline that Ice Cube. I was already gone from the group by then, so he wasn't talking about me. I was on the outside looking in, but it's crazy. And like I said, I keep going back to this. It's so sad that one individual can break up a group. And it was all over business. It was business. When I was in N.W.A, when we were working on Straight Outta Compton, I had produced a song called Supersonic by this girl group called JJ Fad, Supersonic, this big dance record. It went #1. And I wasn't getting paid from the label that I put it on. So I took the record back, put it on Ruthless Records, which was our N.W.A label that we had just started. And it started to blow up again. And our manager at the time, who was managing it, wasn't paying me. And I'm like, there's something, this song is like sold 1 million copies. As a matter of fact, it was the first gold record ever on Ruthless Records, even before N.W.A. The money from Supersonic was funding us making Straight Outta Compton, but I wasn't getting paid. So I had to get an attorney, figure it out. And then that's why I left the group right when we released the album. And it was crazy that because of that, one person, our manager, doing that, Ice Cube kind of saw it after because I got an attorney and I got paid, and he saw me driving around in this Porsche and some nice car. And like, where'd you get that? I'm like, you need to talk to Cherry or you talk to our manager. And then he figured it out. And then he left. And then eventually Dre left. So it's, like you said, if we had learned as a collective early on what we need to know on the business level, that group would probably still be together. You know what I mean? So it's sad that, that song, No Vaseline, came out because Cube was telling everybody else what was going on and they didn't want to listen to him. So it created that divide. So that's what happened with that.
Hi. Apparently, you have done a lot of tech, and then you're also an investor now raising a new fund. A lot of people think that it will be really easy for you. So, can you talk about the fundraising process? Is it just as people imagine? Since you have the name, you have the money, is it just a breath in the park, or every time it's still hard?
No, it's hard. It's hard. You can get the meetings. I'm sure a lot of people here have tried to raise money, and what I found with raising capital, like I'm in Dubai, I'm in Saudi. I know a lot of people over there. I do business, and what I find is raising capital, especially from investors, it flows with the current government and the state of the union and like every day. You know what I mean? Like, remember, it dried up a couple years ago, right after COVID. Everything dried up. Everybody was, now it's starting to open back up. And then, I'm not a government person. So if you like Trump or hate Trump or Republican, Democrat, I'm an acrocrat. I don't even know what that means. That means I don't care. So I don't care about the government because I'm 59 and a half, 59 to 9/10 years old. No matter what happens in government, it ain't ever affected me on my daily life. I still do what I do, right? But what I do find out is depending on what's going on in government and other things, that definitely directly affects you raising money. So you have to, as a fund or as a startup, really be flexible and be able to move and do things with the state of what's going on. So I always tell startups when I speak to startups, like, yeah, you got to really, really be strong with your product or what you're offering. But at the same time, sometimes you got to, it's like that girlfriend that you kind of like. Sometimes you got to do stuff that she want to do, right? Sometimes you just got, all right, I'm gonna go see On Golden Pond or My Piano or My Left Foot, whatever the movies are. I'm gonna go see that, just to get in. And once you get in, then you can just do whatever you want to do. So go to sleep, get some popcorn, whatever. So yeah.
Adaptability.
Adaptability.
Okay. Okay.
Hi. So, speaking of government, there's a lot of ebbs and flows happening in the market right now. And I, along with many other people I've talked to tonight, are starting large fundraises. We're going to have to get creative in how we approach, who we approach, where we go, where we try to find this capital. Do you guys have any unique insights into unique places that we might be able to find investors that maybe we haven't thought of that you have come upon in your many years of raising capital?
I think that, so we take this big corporate route. We're looking at bigger corporate because they have a lot more money, right, to spend. But I'm finding out that a lot of companies like, the Walmarts, and there's a lot of retail, big retail has funds, that they're looking to fund funds and things like that. So they all have their foundations, right? And they have to spend that money because they're trying to get tax write-offs. So that's what I'm finding out. These huge billion-dollar families, they got a lot of money, and it's just getting to it and aligning with what they want to spend it on. And that's part of the problem, is finding what investors or funds or foundations align with what you're trying to do. And I think that's the high level, is just finding those. Like, we had some talks with a Japanese company. We never thought about that, but big Japanese company, they got a fund and they're looking to deploy money in the US. So you just got to find those companies.
That's what I was going to say. International, obviously the market and everything is open a lot to an international uh, status now, right? So it's looking internationally as well. I think, that's been a blessing, for me to travel the world on a constant basis, and being able to travel the world, you see what's going on, in different places. And There's a lot going on just outside of just the US, you know. Sometimes we're so stuck in the US, but yeah.
That's one of the things we're trying to do is we have a bank in Europe that we're working with, and then we're getting a bank in the US as well and trying to tap into their resources. So thank you. Great advice.
The Once Upon a Time in Shaolin album that you kind of touched upon, $1 million album, one copy. From an outsider view, that sounds like a success. Even though the guy that bought it, 2 million, excuse me. So even though the guy that bought it turned out whatever that situation was, it seems like a success, and yet like no one else has, to my knowledge, done that or even tried to get a little creative with their business and creating scarcity. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I think everyone's trying to be so technical about it, and to be honest, that's one of the great things in regards to RZA and I guess the group at times, right? Is that you know a lot of times too, it didn't come about because of money, right? It came about because of the ideals, right? And even when you look at tech and different things, right? It's not the money that comes first; it's the ideal that comes first, right? and and the love behind that, right? So I think even with that, when you look at that, like right, and a lot of people are still talking about it, right? And then it just sold again when they bought it from the Department of Justice for 4 million, right? So look what it's done, right? One album, right? Um, but I think that it didn't come from like it was a thought, right? But it was just a thought put out there, you know what I mean? And sometimes that's the best thought when you put it out there, to see what you can do, right? And a lot of people now, I think that, in order to replicate that or whatever, they're scared to do that, right? I'm gonna show you a quick example, right? So we were touring and we did the Sydney Opera House, right? 4 nights in a row, sold out in Sydney, Australia, right? And prior to that, RZA told everyone, I suggest that to everyone to spend your money in Australia, right? With whatever you're doing. Because, they tax so much. So they tax your money 30% over there, right? So what RZA did is spend all his money on hiring an orchestra in Sydney, Australia to record all the Wu-Tang music. You see? So he spent his money over there so it couldn't be taxed. Came back over here with a project that he's made millions off of it, right? So it's just creative things like that and believing in your idea. He believed it, he thought it out way in advance. You know, was it gonna work? We don't know, but it worked, right?
So when you guys think about the past successes of StockX and Twitch and how these are products meant to service specific communities, and communities that and cultures that many people probably like say like other VCs just overlook. And when as you're building this fund, how do you find what's your ways of finding the right investors who would already be aligned with that instead of talking to thousands of investors who are just not going to understand that message?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about, like big corporate, like trying to find big corporate companies that are already playing in those fields that you're looking at, like the cultural fields, like the Nikes, and they all have foundations and stuff as well. But at the same time, and I'm sure he can definitely align with this, is because of our backgrounds and who we are, we can get inside the door because most of these investors, they grew up on our music, right? And it's so funny. I'll go into some big corporate company to talk to some investor guy, and he's got on this suit and tie, but you look back, he got on like the Jordan ones, I'm like, dude, you got the Jordan ones? Yeah, I got the Jordan ones. And I got this. So, and they're part of the culture, right? Everybody in this room has been touched by culture some way. Like I'm looking around seeing sneakers. I mean, and you go to some people's houses, they're all part of the culture. So I think that's one of the big misses of investors or funds is the fact that they overlook the trillions of dollars, that hip hop and sports and entertainment, they're overlooking that for sometimes higher tech. When you really look at, and I say this all the time, you want to make $1 billion, don't reinvent the wheel. look at all the billion and trillion dollar companies. They pretty much all do the same thing. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, they all do the same thing. They're dealing in media and entertainment and feeding information. And I mean, you can take them all in one hand and they all do the same thing, but they're all billion, trillion dollar companies. So I really, really believe that the cultural play has not really been touched yet. And that's where the big money is going to be going forward, I think.
I will have one more question as well. So on that point, you talked about how every project start with the love, right? That's the most organic, and the music and culture that really break all the barriers. However, what you just said here, super important. You do have to understand the business. So we have a lot of people here in entertainment as well. A lot of people still thinking business in the lens of a creative, but I think that probably is a mistake. So how do you manage the communication with the artists or who are creative, telling them, hey, you have to pay attention to the business so you can actually succeed?
Well, I think too, just going back, I know we talk about the artists, right? And a lot of times the people behind the scenes don't get the credit that they deserve, right? Because that's very important, right? So when you look at, I mean, a lot of people have seen the series and the documentaries that came out. And there was a lot of people, one like being RZA's brother, Divine, right? It was a lot of people, like I said, whether it's RZA, whether it's the members or whatever, that come up with the idea of what they want to do. It was up to a lot of us to get behind it, support it, and make sure that it's manifested, right? Um, so I think that's very important, right? Is that you have the right team behind you, right? Obviously, you know, like we always say, you have the creatives, let them live in their creative space, and we do what we do, right? And that's the whole thing is being able to look at that creativity or whatever's they're building and seeing how we can go out and maximize it.
So when you guys first started out being the founders of Wu-Tang and N.W.A, how was that? Like, where did that come from? Like, I understand it comes from internal, but how? I'm so curious on how that journey was for you. You know, bringing that to life and letting that manifest into what, millions of people have across the world, not billions of people have just got to embrace that. What was like that journey for you guys?
And I'm sure it's pretty similar. So for us growing up in Compton, most of our stories, right? A lot of people say we helped start gangster rap, and we never called it gangster rap because it was just what was going on in the neighborhood, right? You go to the store, you get harassed by the police. You go to the swap meet, you get harassed by the police. You go to the park, there's strawberries. Well, look it up. Uh, you see the crackheads and the strawberries and it all of this stuff. It was in our neighborhood, and we just started rapping about it, right? And like he said, people think, and the one I get tired of is when people talk about Tupac. Tupac was like this. Tupac wasn't thinking about that stuff. He was just writing songs. Yeah. And later on, it becomes this thing, right? So when we were in the studio, most of the time we were trying to figure out what we were going to eat for lunch. We was writing songs. Mm-hmm. We was having fun. We play video games. We, whatever. And you build this body of work that people appreciate over time, and it grows to this, Godzilla thing. But it was literally just, we were reporters of what was going on in the neighborhood, and the kids in the suburbs and other places across the country got a sneak peek of Compton. It was like, wow, and it just grew. And one thing I'll say I didn't even mention, I like to thank Tipper Gore, Al Gore's wife, for taking our records and putting them in a big pile and setting them on fire on national television. Because honestly, when she did that and she created the PMRC, the explicit lyrics sticker, all that did was tell kids, I want that. Right? That's what it was. The moment you put that sticker on there, that just put a signal out to every kid in America is, I am going to buy that. So yeah, it's it.
I mean, you know, for us, it was about brotherhood. You know what I mean? Like that's where it came from first. You know what I mean? And then the music came about, but we never left the brotherhood, right?
Yeah.
That always was first for us, right?
Gotcha.
If you think about it to this day, right? Obviously, brothers are gonna fight, right? In the house, you got 9 brothers in the house. They're gonna fight at times, but we've never been physical with each other.
Oh yeah.
Never been. There's been plenty of heated arguments, but
Yeah.
no one has ever gotten physical with each other. That was one of our rules, right?
That's fan.
So, you know, when you look at that, you know, and like for me, I never get tired of telling them, you know, thank you for the journey, you know,
Yeah.
because we were in the projects, man, you know, just, you know, living every day and to be able to, you know, here we are 30 plus years later, still traveling the world. And now we get to see the world, man. We never would have thought this, you know,
Yeah.
at that time. You know, we were just like I said, they were doing it for the love, you know. Like I said, RZA, you know, his brother and different people had an inkling because they went into the business first, right?
Uh-huh.
And then they came and brought that information back, right?
Gotcha.
Um, but like I said, it was the brotherhood, and it still is, you know.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Let's have a round of applause for these guys.